Hello and welcome to ATACS episode 43. I am your stand-in host, Ryan, today. Today is Saturday, August the 11th, that is.
Are you Ryan every day or just today?
I'm Ryan every day. Today I am the stand-in host, though.
I understand.
So forgive the starts and stops and pauses and all that, because my hosting is very, very rusty. But today we have a small panel. Our usual hosts and some of our usual members couldn't make it, so we got a small power hour here with Wes from, is it Clayton now?
Yeah, Clayton.
Finally got it right for once. Well, Wes from Clayton, North Carolina. How is it going, Wes? Before we get started.
Oh, it's fine.
And
I'm sort of sleepy. I don't know. I'm trying to get out of that though, because I gotta get a little bit more excitable for this thing.
Yeah, well, I think you have some very interesting games.
I do have some stuff to talk about. Yeah,
some very interesting opinions. So I will be curious to hear. But we also have Will, who is, I believe, eating while podcasting.
Well,
how you doing, Will?
I'm pretty good. I mean, I'm getting towards satiated, and that's my goal. So I've got a number of goals. One of them's being satiated. The other one is energizing Wes.
Here we go. I'm ready.
So
what are we having for dinner? I'm getting right now.
Pizza.
Oh, well, all right. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can feel you transmitting that energy over the wire.
Absolutely.
And
I
you're
ordered it on my phone.
Yeah.
And you're still from Greenville?
Close enough. I'm from Greenville,
North Carolina.
There you go.
There we go. And I guess I'm still your host. Still Ryan, still from Brooklyn, New York. So let's kick it off. Wes, tell me about some stuff. Tell me about some well, I'll let you start.
Video games, y'all. Okay, let's see. Where should we start here? I played a handful of things, especially since the last time I was on one of these. So even the list that I'm going to go through here is not all the things I've played, but it's sort of the most interesting stuff. So let's start with ReCore, which is a game from a couple of years ago. There has been a definitive edition and some added content, and then I recently played it on Xbox One.
So yeah, this is, I guess, quote unquote, the good stuff.
Sure, if you want to call it that.
This is a game, I think. So I guess, yeah, just to give some context, I know I'm particularly interested to hear about it, because it was a game that showed a lot of, if I understand it correctly, it showed kind of a lot of potential, but then it seemed like it didn't deliver.
Yeah. So this is one of Microsoft's many kind of questionable or failed projects with the Xbox One. They showed it at E3 one year. I think it was either 2015 or somewhere around there, and people were really excited about the look of it and sort of the vibe of it. And it was a console exclusive, and people like to get excited for those. And it was a new franchise, so all of that stuff. It's from some of the people who brought you Metroid Prime, so like some lineage there.
Yeah, visibly it looks kind of like a little bit like a Enslaved.
Yeah,
that or even like I don't know, even Horizon maybe somehow.
Yeah, it has sort of that, third person, lots of movement, that kind of feel to it, and it does kind of have the robots.
Yeah, there you go.
And it does have kind of the Enslaved like style of, like, I don't mean this as a negative, but kind of like of a B game kind of look. And then when it came out, yeah, it was kind of like some people liked it, but nobody really loved it particularly, and pretty much everybody universally agreed that it just kind of falls off a cliff and doesn't end well and has a lot of structural problems that get worse as you keep playing the game. So they've done a definitive edition. They've done some work on it since then. I played the definitive edition, and it's still just kind of doesn't. They did not fix it, but I'm assuming it's probably better. There are some specific things that they've done, but I guess first, just to say what the game is, it is a third-person action game. It is, I would say, primarily a platformer. I would say it's a third-person shooter in the same way that the Metroid Prime games are a first-person shooter, which means not really.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. At least I get what you're saying.
Yeah, very, very liberal lock-on. You're not really having to aim or do a bunch of really precise motions. It's more about movement and platforming.
Okay, and so I guess with this definitive edition, because one of the things, and my memory on this is fuzzy because I was just a casual observer, but I feel like aside from the aesthetic and like Will mentioned, sort of that enslaved, maybe kind of campy, but maybe kind of cool, it seemed like maybe it could deliver on sort of a unique story and setting. But also the other thing I feel like that people were somewhat excited about was there anything, or is there anything about the game's mechanics? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't ReCore allude to some sort of mechanical thing you do with robots or the world or whatever?
Yeah, so your character, Jewel, is pretty straightforward, has a gun, and you move around the environment to find treasure and fight enemies by shooting them. The other major game mechanic and one of your major points of progression is building and customizing your robot buddies. And so all robots in this game are made up of a core and a frame. Core is kind of their energy source that has one of three colors. It's either red, blue, or yellow. And then the frame is the metal body around that kind of gives it its basic combat and traversal abilities. So the spider frame can climb onto certain scaffolding structures and pull you along the environment. The dog frame can find hidden stuff under the ground. The ape gorilla frame can break obstacles, that kind of stuff. But then they also all work differently in combat. So a big part of the game is finding robot parts, or rather finding the blueprints for robot parts, and then scavenging resources and building those parts and then fitting them onto your robot buddies to help you get further into the game.
And it sounds like, I remember that when it came out, like you mentioned, it kind of fell flat in terms of reception, and it sounded like that system ended up, I don't know, being clunky, boring, unintuitive, some combination of that.
Incredibly grindy is what it is. So.
Oh, wow. They just made it slow?
Yeah, so, you want to progress your robots by finding new parts and upgrading them, but to do that, you have to go into the world and find a challenge room or just a hidden chest somewhere that has a blueprint for some part. So you might find a dog head part. So it's one of 5 pieces available for the dog frame. And it's, it has certain stats associated with it. It might have a special ability associated with it. But once you find the blueprint, then you have to go and fight a bunch of enemy dog robots and bust them apart to get the parts you need to craft that piece, and then you can equip it on your dog robot. So that progression is incredibly slow, because the blueprints are just kind of scattered around. If you actually want to make a whole set, which the game mechanically encourages you to do, then you'd have to go find all those blueprints and then find all the parts needed to craft them and do that.
And is that necessary for progression, or is it just sort of an RPG thing that they kind of...
Yeah, it's kind of just an RPG thing that isn't totally necessary, at least to finish the game, I don't think. But I think it just ends up feeling, for me at least, very unsatisfying, because what I want to do is customize my robots and pick the abilities that I think are cool or interesting, or okay, I'm going to build this robot for this specific role and then bring him on this challenge. But in order to have the flexibility for that to be interesting, I would have to do dozens of hours of scavenging.
Okay, that's it. And is that so? I guess a couple questions. Like, one is, have you finished the game?
That's a whole nother term we can get into.
Okay.
But
So
no.
we won't get there yet. But then, like, I guess, yeah, because I wanted to follow up also on the story, but I can definitely see how, like, one of the things to me that's been so good about a game like Monster Hunter this year is sometimes that progression loop can be grindy, especially if you're targeting something specific, like a top tier weapon.
Yeah.
But from my play experience so far, I just like the hunting so much that a lot of times, I mean, yeah, if I want something, I'll target those monsters, but a lot of times I'll just kind of hunt whatever, and then it's like, oh, hey, I've got some parts, like, let me throw something cool together. Whereas it sounds like in this game, like, they've made the gameplay not fun with a progression. A really slow progression system. That just sounds like a terrible.
I mean, the combat is fine, it's serviceable, but it's certainly not a Monster Hunter. It's not something that is just fun to engage with by itself. So if I'm gonna be fighting enemies for an hour, I would want to be gaining a lot out of that, and you don't really.
Right.
So the progression just overall ends up feeling pretty unsatisfying. But to kind of table that for the moment and to move on to some other points that you brought up, is that I also just think the environments you're exploring and the world building and the storytelling and writing and all that is just so boilerplate that it's also very uninteresting and unrewarding to see that stuff. Which was really unfortunate because I think it's a decent setup, but they just don't do anything with it throughout the game.
Yeah, that's that. I guess, like, you know, I haven't played.
So give
this.
us the. I'm sorry. I was curious, like, the basic, I guess, story bone. I guess what's like the hook? Like when you're dropped in and you play as, what's her name? Violet. Jewel. Okay. Sorry. So
that is Joule. So we got, you know, some physics engineering jokes here.
Right. Okay. So and what is she doing? Why is she here?
All right. So people have left Earth because Earth is dying. Right.
Okay.
So this is near
Classic.
future. And they're going to another planet to colonize it. I think it's called Eden Prime.
Okay.
And so they're all.
That sounds like a thing that's been said before.
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, there were all these spaceships that were supposed to land and start like terraforming the planet and start setting up colonies. And the people on the ships are like engineers and scientists, and they also have their robot buddies to help them sort of establish a new world.
Eden Prime was in Mass Effect. It was
okay. I hope I have that right, but
I don't know.
If I don't, oh well.
It's okay.
It's something equally generic. If it's not that.
That sounds exciting.
Far Eden.
Far Eden, that's what it is.
Okay. I'm found. Okay.
Yeah, Far Eden, that's right.
Okay.
So something goes wrong.
Oh no.
And Jewel wakes up and she's the only one that seems to be awake. All the other colony ships are like stalled somewhere, but she doesn't quite know what happened to them. And all the robots have like landed on the planet and gone rogue, right? So they're all evil now, except for her like cool dog friend robot. So that's the setup.
Okay,
so she's trying to figure out what happened. She's trying to restart the terraforming process and figure out what's going on with the evil robots.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the setup sounds actually, I mean, maybe a little generic, but like some of that,
it's fine.
Yeah, some of that is like kind of cool. Like you got
mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the story. I would not characterize, or the plot I would not characterize as bad. I think just with the combination of like sort of slow, unrewarding gameplay and the environments are pretty barren because it's all desert because it hasn't been terraformed yet. And the story just not going very far it just ended up feeling pretty generic and underwhelming. Like
Gotcha.
the game doesn't end very far from where it started in terms of
This
how
is,
much has happened.
It's a tough thing. Like with a lot of these games, like this ReCore,
Mm-hmm.
you hear through the grapevine, it's like, well, ReCore is good now, or No Man's Sky is good now, or Warframe is good now. And I think it's become a really odd thing with these games because, a lot of times in the past, if a game came out, it was like you got one shot, and you made it, and it was something that people appealed to, or something that appealed to people, and then or it didn't. And I often think about like that Henry Ford quote, and it says he says, "If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses."
Yeah, yeah.
And I think about that a lot with respect to these games that get, it's like, well, people didn't like that, and people didn't like this, and people didn't like that, and so it becomes sort of this, really kind of, I don't know, like crowdsourced idea piece, So, I wonder if that sort of thing, I don't know, just how to make sense of that, like,
Yeah.
are we getting games that are really, I guess, visionary, or are we getting these sorts of like maybe aspects of them are true to the vision that the artist had, but then the rest of it just becomes, well, what do people actually want to play? So I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing.
It is, and you see that in a lot of games. Like if every game has open world elements now, that's because those are popular, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely get where you're coming from with that. And ReCore definitely has a bunch of open world elements. Like there's a bunch of big maps with little treasure chests scattered around them for you to find.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and in general, it's tough to craft a good game, especially. I don't know if this was AAA or not, but
yeah, I don't know. It definitely, especially with the stuff that I've read about how it was at launch, it definitely seems like they ran out of time or money or both.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking too, because Will mentioned Enslaved as an analogy, and I played like the first little bit of that game actually semi-recently within the past year, and I know for some people that game's aesthetic and setup, like with kind of like the character of Monkey and all that, kind of carried it for them, and they really liked the thing. I don't know that anybody like fell super in love with the gameplay, but people were like, okay, kind of neat, and I think it was like a serviceable third-person action game, which was the flavor of the day, and like. But then I when I tried to play it, it didn't age well. It felt very stiff and generic, and I think even back then, I think some people felt that way. So it's just interesting that sometimes that a charming idea or story setup can help carry a game, and then sometimes it just falls flat.
It's tough. A lot of I think that aesthetic really appeals to me. That sort of like nature has taken back over aesthetic. I think another game that does it pretty well, that's probably even more mainstream, is I think The Last of Us has some elements of that. You go on this college campus and there's like a giraffe walking around the football field or something like that. So I guess I was kind of interested in ReCore because it seemed maybe like it was pointed in that direction, but I don't know.
Yeah, I could see why you would think that from the aesthetic, but it's actually humans colonizing another planet, so it's not quite the same thing.
So it's actually kind of the opposite. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we've or maybe beat ReCore into the ground a little bit, but I don't know if you had anything, or actually.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll say about it, and then I do want to move on to games that I actually like, is the end game, which basically boiled down to the main way you progress like to whole new areas is by collecting cores. So there are these special types of cores that you collect by doing challenges and main quests and stuff, and you need certain numbers to unlock doors, basically. And it's a pretty slow, or a pretty quick ramp for most of the game. You need like 17 or something to get to the last area of the game. But then as soon as you get to that last area, you fight a boss, and then there's immediately another door where you need like 30 or something. It's like this huge jump in the number you need, and then you just have to go back into all the areas of the game and find more. And that's where I stopped playing. Go ahead.
Is that for like the real ending, or like what is this extra door?
It's like there's like a few more short combat / puzzle areas, and then another final boss after that.
I don't know, Nate. I mean, now I don't know what's behind the extra door. Maybe you should go back and find like 30 stars or cores or whatever.
Well, here's the other thing that really made it a definitive ending for me was that I literally got to that door and was looking at the number of cores that I needed, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. So I like swiveled over to my computer and was looking it up. Like, okay, am I going to need any more after this point? What's the easiest way to get these things quickly, that kind of stuff. And then when I turned back to my Xbox, it had the game had crashed. It had booted me back to the title screen, and then when I tried to load my save, it was just gone.
Oh, whoa!
Or actually, it wasn't just gone. There was an old save from like 4 hours into the game there, and that was all that was there.
Oh man, it sounds like the robots got into your Xbox.
Yeah, I was just like, well, okay, I'm pretty sure ReCore doesn't want me to play it anymore, so I'm just going to turn this off.
You came to a mutual understanding.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a whole thing.
Oh wow. So anyway, ReCore.
That's ReCore. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not. I would not say it's a terrible game. I didn't find any part of it that really stuck with me, and most of it was very generic and kind of unfulfilling.
Yeah.
That's my overall impression there.
Yeah, that's good to know. I wasn't really on the fence about that one. It wasn't on my radar, but it's also, if you had been like, oh, well, they patched it up, it's an interesting game now, it's like, yeah, maybe it's on the like long-term backlog or something.
But after that, I played a couple other games that I didn't know much about going into, but I actually ended up liking a pretty good amount. So one was Rime, which I can talk about pretty quickly, and that's Rime. It is a pretty stylish, I would say, going for sort of an artistic style. Third-person puzzle platformer. You can kind of think in terms of like an Ico or like a Journey. Something along those lines are probably good touchstones.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at like screenshots because I'd seen the title screen, and I think maybe it had been on like some bundles or sales.
Yeah, probably.
Kind of floating around, but these environments, or this one environment at least, looks pretty cool.
Yeah, they're nice looking environments. They're very different. There's like 4 or 5 different environments in the game. It's not super long. It's completely wordless, so there's no text or talking at all. You just have a yell button. The basic gameplay is you run and climb and jump and yell at things to get through puzzles.
Oh man, what game does that remind me of? Like, I'm trying to think. What you're describing though does remind me a lot of like a Shadow of the Colossus or something like that, where it's like very minimalistic, and you like at the very beginning you can like raise your sword.
Right. Right. Yeah, so it's cool. It's got a neat style to it. I like the puzzles and the environment. Some of the it does more than I expected going in. I kind of I went in only seeing like one trailer and knowing that it was short, but I didn't know how short. So I actually thought when I got to the end of the first area that I was going to see credits, and then there were like 4 more areas that were very different, and the puzzles get like way more complex and interesting. So I was like pleasantly surprised by that, I guess, not knowing anything about it.
Cool. So you came down, like, it sounds like pretty positive on it.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. And it's, like I said, it's not telling you a story verbally, but there's definitely a narrative there that I enjoyed, and it has a nice, some nice turns it takes. I'll say that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm not sure where I fall on some of those. I didn't like Shadow of the Colossus. I think I like some of those games in theory more than I actually enjoy playing them.
Yeah, it's definitely one I think you have to be like in the right mindset for, because it's just like it kind of it has its moments of just like, oh, this is a chill game. I'm just going to kind of wander around and yell at things, and then there are some parts where it's like, oh no, I actually have to like really pay attention to what's going on in order to figure out how to progress and get through this puzzle.
Right.
So that's Rime. I did like that. And then the other thing I played, and these were all through Game Pass actually, all three of these. The other one I played was Dandara, which is a game that came out earlier this year that I also like quite a bit.
I've seen a little bit about that, and it actually it actually kind of pinged my radar, but based on the reception, I kind of bounced off of it. I guess partly, or one thing is that there have been a lot of those, because it's sort of Metroidvania-ish.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, like earlier I played Iconoclasts, and I had...
Those came out like right around the same time, I think.
Yeah. So when I saw Dandara...
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, but whatever.
Okay, I'll go with Dandara. When I saw that one on sale, like I was like, this could be good, because I do like those games, and we'll probably talk about Dead Cells shortly, which I've been enjoying, but I didn't enjoy Iconoclasts, and I saw kind of mixed reception on Dandara, so I'm kind of curious to hear like how you've been enjoying it so far.
So I guess first up, I would say that it is a Metroidvania, and in a lot of ways, it's a very simple one of those. But the thing about it is that the movement is completely unique and different from anything else I've ever played. You don't just free move around the environment. Your character is literally just stuck in place. You don't just like push left to walk left or right to walk right. But then you can aim by moving the joystick, and then press A to jump to another wall or a ceiling. So gravity is not a concern in this game. You literally just are jumping between specific grip points on the wall. So there's these big environments, and parts of the wall are colored white, and those are parts you can stand on, and they might be on the floor, the walls, or the ceilings, and you're just bouncing between them all the way through this Metroidvania maze. So it has a very different feel from normal Metroid exploration.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine, and I mean, I guess some other games have had like teleportation and grappling hook type things. Would you say that's sort of what it is?
Yeah, I think you can probably draw some parallels there. But yeah, just imagine like if you couldn't walk left or right, and instead, as you move the stick, it's just pointing a little line away from your character. And if it snaps onto a point you can attach to, then you press A, and she just does a very quick, like almost like a teleport, but not that fast, jump to that point.
Okay.
And then you can also shoot while aiming. So you're basically jumping and shooting.
Okay. Interesting.
So the core gameplay is just navigating the environments, dodging enemy attacks, and shooting them, and getting through some light puzzles and things like that, gaining new traversal abilities to get through, just like any other Metroidvania, to get through specific types of obstacles, and fighting bosses. And it's not a long game either. Like I said, it's a fairly simple game. It just plays so differently that I found it pretty interesting, pretty refreshing. I had a good time with it. I feel like it controls pretty well. It's pretty snappy. By the end of the game, you're just kind of like, if you watch a video of somebody who's like really good at that game, and you had never played it before, I bet it just looks like they're just moving impossibly fast and just like teleporting around this environment in a way that almost doesn't look like it makes sense. So it's kind of neat.
So yeah, that could be something I might enjoy watching, like a speed run of.
Mm-hmm. I bet a speed run of that game is really interesting.
But it sounds like you came down kind of positive on it, or?
Oh yeah, I liked it.
Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, because I know some of the reviews I saw were kind of mixed, and I don't know if I'll pick it up after so many other 2D games this year.
Yeah,
but
for sure. And I think it just depends on what you look for in a Metroidvania. If you look for like very deep mechanics or like really intricate exploration, then that's not what this game is really. It's kind of like a quick actiony, different movement style. That's what it's selling.
Gotcha. And you didn't find it like super restrictive or anything?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
It feels that way at first because it's so different. Like at the beginning of the game, I was always like, man, I don't know like how to handle this encounter. I feel like I'm just standing still taking these hits. But no, you just have to keep moving. That's the whole thing with that game.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'd like to watch maybe like a Let's Play or something of that.
Yeah. It also has some really cool music and some really neat, like, stylish enemy designs and stuff like that. So it's worth looking at least, even if you're not going to play it.
Well, yeah, that's good news. Yeah, because I know, like, I looked at it and then I was like, I got these other good games to play. Like, people kind of like it, people kind of don't like it. But I might leave that one on the table for now.
Yeah.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to get to right now? I know we'll be circling back on a couple of things that we have, you and I have both played.
No, I think that's good for now.
All right, cool. Well, I will. I'll go ahead and maybe give you a break and pass it over to Mr. Will.
Hello.
What does our indie game correspondent have for this ATACS episode?
Well, I think I went back through and looked at kind of what I've been playing, the ones I thought were kind of the most interesting. The first thing I guess I wanted to mention was a game called Aviary Attorney.
That sounds hilarious.
Yeah,
it sounds like a Will game.
I already feel like it's a winner.
So it's got this sort of like, I don't know what you'd call it, like lithograph. There's some name for the type of artwork it is, but it's kind of like sepia toned, old school 2D art. And you play as JJ Falcon, and you are a defense attorney, and you have a Sparrowson, your assistant. And basically, it's sort of like a point and click kind of adventure, I guess, detective game. And you're hired to take these certain cases and defend. And it's kind of I thought it was just really, really good writing, actually. So it's got this sort of the cases kind of twist and turn. You can find more or less evidence, and that evidence can sort of mean the difference between you being able to, successfully defend your client or not. And at one point, the game had sort of, I guess, either through the twists and turns of the story or through my own incompetence as an investigator, I had gotten to these points where I had really lost a lot of faith in the judicial system as it's presented in the game. I was like, gosh, I can't defend this person, or this person got away and they really shouldn't have, because I didn't have the evidence that I needed. And I think it really it treats it in a really good way. I think that these different little, even though everybody in the game is like an animal, like a lot of them have a lot of humanity, and you revisit a lot of the characters. So, like for instance, in the first case, there is someone who sort of perjures themselves on the stand, and then in the next case in the game, you actually run into them while they're doing community service.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, a lot of these characters are really fleshed out, and you learn a lot about them. But I thought it was really, really fantastic, just because it made me ask a lot of questions about the judicial system, and it made me feel this sort of what would it be like, at least if you're as inept as I was, what would it be like if within the judicial system you kept seeing people get put free, or people get locked up who were innocent, or people get to go free who were guilty, and what might you do if you had the chance to try and right those wrongs, or try and correct things. And so I think that was interesting. And it also, I think it coupled with a lot of episodes that I'd been listening to. There's a really, really popular podcast called Criminal, which is actually based out of Durham. And each episode is just about a different criminal case. But there are certain criminal cases where, they'll kind of go over, and it's really like a miscarriage of justice. So someone was maybe convicted, and then they served 20 years before they were found to be innocent. And so I think the fact that I had actually listened to a number of those on a recent trip, like with Jeannie, my wife, we listen to podcasts on our trips. And so the fact that I had listened to a bunch of those right before playing this game, I think led it to be a little bit more impactful. I was bound and determined to make JJ Falcon a very successful attorney. And I just couldn't do it, I think. But I thought it was really, really good. I mean, it's quite simple. The little animation is hilarious. So the little birds, like, they'll like hop around and blink and then like turn back and forth. And it's crazy how much expressiveness can really be conveyed through that really simple animation. But go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I really like this look, like the style of this game. And it sounds like though it's, even though, I mean, these are caricatures basically, or anthropomorphic or whatever, you call it. It sounds like it's sort of semi-realistic, like serious-ish writing.
I mean, it's certainly silly, and you can tell that it's kind of silly just by looking at it. But there really is a lot of, I think there's a lot of humanity that these characters show. And so I was kind of pleasantly surprised. It just seemed interesting, like looking at it. I was like, Aviary Attorney.
The name is great, and this like pencil sketch style is really good.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. The other thing, I guess, one thing I want to touch on quickly, and I'm never going to spend much time talking about this game on ATACS, but I had started, it must have been a week or two ago, I picked up, probably way longer, Super Mega Baseball 2. And just a quick little shout there, like I don't really play many sports games. And I guess the closest thing I usually get is like Disc Jam or Rocket League or something, some sort of bizarre hybrid. But I did play baseball growing up, and I feel like there used to be like these really fun, kooky games, like sports games. Like I don't know if any of you guys grew up on the Genesis, like stuff like Mutant League Football.
Right.
Just like
I feel like I played that game.
Just kind of like weird twists on like sports, so you've got a sports base, like, a sports base, but then you kind of just build something ridiculous on it. And so, and I remember my favorite game, my favorite sports game probably when I was growing up was King Griffey Jr. Baseball, or King Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball. And I mean, all the rules were there. I mean, everything was straight, but there was just this like added layer of like cartoony ridiculousness. Like all the players had ridiculous names. Like they were like cartoonishly large biceps, and like whenever they struck out they would break their bat. And like the music was surprisingly good. But to me, Super Mega Baseball 2, the first one was really good, but the first one didn't really have kind of like an online cooperative mode. And so this one actually has a cooperative mode. So I've got a season going with two of my different, two friends of mine. I've got one season with one friend and one with another. And so it's like when one person is pitching, you kind of alternate. So one inning when you're in the field, one guy will pitch and the other one will play the field. Then the next inning that you're actually in the field, the other player will pitch. Then the other one will be in the field.
Okay.
And then it's basically you take turns batting, and then whoever's not batting controls the base runners if there are any base runners. And so, you mostly stay engaged, and it's basically you've got like a normal pitch, you've got a normal hit, and then you've got a power hit and a power pitch, and it's harder to position. So, for instance, if you're trying to do the power hitting, it's going to be harder for you to move your cursor where you need to move to hit the ball. So you can get more power, but it's kind of at a risk. And then the same thing with the pitch. Your pitch will be more effective, but it's harder for you to actually hit the spot that you're trying to throw it. And that's most of the game. I mean, so it's just sort of, and a lot of the players have ridiculous names. My favorite name is there's this cleanup batter on a team called the Wide Loads, and his name is Chimo Gaspar, which I don't know that name. Like every time he comes up to bat, I'm like, Chimo. He's great. So the next time I play, what's up?
Do the names look like they've come out of like some random syllable generator or something like that?
Almost. I mean, there's always like a little weird theme to them,
Okay.
And like the big guys, they always have like just like names like Hank Hamhock and stuff like that. It's just great. So I always have a ton of fun playing it, and it reminds me a lot of that old style Ken Griffey Jr. baseball type of situation. And there's not like it's not going to blow anyone's mind, but anybody who's looking for like a solid baseball game, which I don't know if anybody in our ATACS crew fits that bill, but it is a neat thing.
Yeah, that is cool though, because like I don't play sports games really either, but I definitely remember playing some back in that era where they were a little less simulationist, a little less serious. So I think there is a market for that for sure.
Yeah, and every time I think about some of the newer ones, they're just so dense,
Yeah.
And they're all like photorealistic, and so I like that this one is just ridiculous.
Now, and out of curiosity, have you considered playing anything like Blood Bowl?
I haven't, and I think they did just come out with a new, I think there was a kickstarted version of a new Mutant League football coming out at some point. I don't know if it's actually out yet, but I'm not really into football, period. But I mean, those games were kind of fun. So who knows?
So no, like Tecmo Bowl or NFL Blitz for you or whatever?
I didn't really get into them. I thought Blitz was fun. But yeah, Super Mega Baseball 2 is probably more my speed, but I could try it at some point. I mean, if any of you guys are interested in it, I would be like, yeah, let's get in there. And, the crazy thing about Mutant League, I know, was that, your players could get killed. And that was a tough thing because then you had to sub them out and get a new player in there. But,
yeah.
Just tell them to walk it off.
Yeah.
It does kind of work that way, I guess.
And then the last thing I guess I was going to kind of mention is a game I actually just finished today called Dark Quest 2. Okay. And it's pretty, when you talk about William being the indie correspondent, it's in there, it's real indie style. So
I am kind of curious, and I guess you're about to set the stage, but this sounds like it could be a JRPG. And I know, like your deep-rooted love of all things Japanese, especially in the RPG genre. But
yeah,
I just kind of wonder, maybe I'm misled here.
Well, so it's sort of like an isometric turn-based dungeon crawler. Okay, but you can play it co-op, and that's always a selling point for me.
I'm seeing that.
And there are 6 different classes. There's an overworld map that looks kind of like if you remember like Mario World 3. You've got the world map and you've got like the little lines that one connects to the other that connects to the other.
Right.
This game kind of has that overworld situation, and then there are you can take different routes. And of course, you might eventually want to beat all the levels, but sometimes, you might run into a wall on one side, and you're like, well, maybe, I want to get to this level here, but maybe I can go and go to this one first, and that can also get me to the same level I want to get to if I hit a wall on this other side. And so we found ourselves hitting a couple walls like that. And
Like difficulty walls?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of the, but the cool thing about it, I mean, I am surprisingly into this game. I mean, I did finish it today. It was only, about a little over 8 hours. It's not like the type of thing that you're going to spend a whole month playing or anything. But the cool thing about it is there are a lot of abilities that you just kind of need to take advantage of, because the odds are kind of stacked against you a lot in the game. And so, for instance, one of my favorite moves is this move called like Tornado that the wizard gets. And basically, you can cast Tornado, and it just travels in a straight line in front of you and deals 4 damage to every enemy that's in front of you. And so sometimes when you're in these rooms with tons of enemies, you actually kind of want to pull back and see if you can actually get them to line up in front of you, or if you have like a place you can bottleneck them. And that's the type of thinking that you have to do in the game a lot, is like think about, well, okay, so which guys do I have who can kind of handle this situation? So there was one time, for instance, there's another wizard spell that's really interesting. That's like a firewall, and it doesn't do a lot of damage. It only deals 1 damage to any enemy that runs into it. But there are a couple rooms in the game where there are these assassin enemies that are goblins that deal tons of damage, but they only have 1 health apiece. And so, we found a way to basically funnel back and then put a firewall in front of us. And that way, like anytime any of the goblins came in, and it had like 20 of them in there, and so there's a lot of thought like that takes place in the game. And it's just really cool and creative, and it's really satisfying whenever you actually kind of come up with a solution to some of these rooms that before you were like, oh my gosh, how do they expect us to do this? The abilities that the different characters have are pretty interesting. They have a lot of really creative abilities that you can kind of get into. So, and it's super cheap, like most of these indie games are. But yeah, I thought it was actually pretty great. I had a really fun time with it. It did seem like there were 2 of the classes that kind of, well, there's some really good classes. Myself and my partner used a wizard and a priest for the vast majority of the game, but there's also a really good character called like a dark monk that has the ability to sort of temporarily make enemies attack each other. So that sort of stuff's interesting. Of course, there's also some items, some abilities you can get. There's potions you can take into battle, but it's all not particularly complicated,
So what you're describing to me sounds a little bit like, would you say it's gameplay-wise maybe similar to like a Divinity or a Card Hunter or something?
Probably closer to
or even
Card
something
Hunter.
else.
Maybe a little closer to Card Hunter than it is Divinity. I'd say that as a general rule, you've got a basic attack, and then you might have 2 or 3 passive abilities, and then maybe 2 or 3 like active abilities. Some of those abilities you can only do once per map. Some of them have charges, so you might be able to do them 2 or 3 times per map. But it's not quite as wide range as something like Divinity.
Which is pretty systems heavy and complex.
Yeah. There's less going on than that, but there's still enough so that you really kind of have to think your way out of some of the situations.
Okay.
So it was a fun little thing.
That's pretty cool. I liked Card Hunter a lot. And what you're describing echoes a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's no deck building in this or anything, but there are some abilities that kind of work pretty well together in tandem. So you can kind of figure those out.
Impervious Nimbus or whatever, and Fire Blast
You're
or
talking
whatever.
About Impenetrable Nimbus. Right?
Impenetrable Nimbus, yeah.
I will never forget that card because it saved my bacon innumerable times. But anyway, so those were the things that I've played a lot of. I mean, I have gotten a lot more into the Monster Hunter. It's kind of
Nice.
sunk its claws into me a little bit, and so I've been kind of getting into that more.
What is your weapon of choice in Monster Hunter?
I've been a bow guy.
Okay.
I just read. I watched some video a long time ago that was like, if you like this sort of thing, you'll like this sort of weapon. And they were saying that, if you're the type of person who thinks shotguns are lots of fun and like first person shooters and stuff, then you'll probably like the bow, especially, those spread shots.
Yeah.
And I found that to be generally true. So I've been basically rocking that sort of situation. Sometimes it can be, I've kind of hit a wall right now where, the end of the game, there are, I guess when you're to the mid to late high rank or whatever, there are a lot of searching for tracks. It's like I had to search for question mark Rathian tracks. Then I had to search for Nergiganti tracks. And then now I have to search for 3 different Elder Dragon tracks and 3 different zones. And it's getting a little tiresome, but I think that once you kind of get through all of this and just get to where you can just sort of go and take on whatever you want, maybe some of the hardened versions of some of the guys, maybe it'll kind of ease up. But I haven't really been, it's sort of been, I'd have to like push myself to actually do the main quest pieces because right now they're pretty tiresome. But it's been a pretty fun time.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. I feel like I do remember there were parts where it got a little long in the tooth for me as well. For me, I guess I did so many like side hunts that I didn't need to do that it helped smooth some of that out a little bit. But if you really want to get to that in-game stuff, it can feel pretty gated with some of the arbitrary stuff, especially when it's like load into a map, run across the map, find 2 tracks, press the circle button, then load out. Like that can be very tedious.
Yeah.
Kind of rough.
And I think that might have was that part of what bit you, Nate? And
yeah, I think that's actually the spot he's describing is when I stopped playing that game. Partially because I was also moving at the time, but then when I was thinking about picking it back up again, I was just like, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that stuff.
Yeah. If you push through it and you enjoy like the challenges and some of the higher, there are new monsters, there are more mechanics and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely like watching my brother play and some of you guys play kind of has reminded me about some of that.
Oh yeah. But that's most of what I've been jamming on here recently. How about you?
And I think it's cool that you actually ended up falling on the side of liking it because I wasn't sure if you would enjoy all of the aspects since you haven't. I don't know if you had played many similar games that I had known about.
No, it's a pretty new thing. So I like that. I do feel like once you get a handle on the different systems, it can be a lot of fun to try and kind of put together, a build. There are some things that kind of push you back. I do feel like a lot of it is really, really poorly explained. So
that
for
is
instance,
definitely true.
like all of a sudden, for instance, I just learned recently about these power charms and armor charms and that you could upgrade them. Like, it's initially I remember, because I hadn't really spent much time online, but the guy I was playing with, we had finished one of these fights and he went and talked to the guy and he's like, this guy's got something in his thing that's like $25,000 and it says it ups your attack. What does that do? And it's like, well, I don't know. Is that something you put in your weapon? It's like, well, I don't know. What, what is it? Where do what do you do with that? Do you, and it's just like, and then upgrading it too. Like, how would you know that you could upgrade it? Like, I mean, it's just like so many little things like that.
If you're not a series veteran, I think this game has smoothed some of that out, but it does, and I mean, to a certain degree, it does leave some room for discovery, but at the same time, like, you can also trip over a lot of those systems for a long time without realizing it. I remember, like, learning to use flash pods against flying monsters. And in the low ranks, the games will put them in the box for free. And like when I switched from bow to dual blades, like I was having trouble hunting flying monsters, and I got so tired of it, I was like, well, let's try these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the best thing ever is just like knocking a flying monster out of the air with like by basically flashbanging it.
Right, right.
So it has those cool moments, but yeah, there's definitely so much going on, and I'm sure there are still systems. I mean, I was looking up today. Okay, what is a demon drug like versus a might peel versus like
Yeah,
which ones of these stack, and how, like, why is this so expensive? Like, so exactly. I hear you.
Yeah. Well, how about yourself? What you been jamming?
Yeah. I've been doing some of the Monster Hunter. Along with the group, we're getting a pretty sizable play group now of probably 6 or 7 people, which has been really cool. And I guess just as a quick note, I've been picking up a couple new weapons. I've been playing the Lance and the Sword and Shield.
Nice.
And I tried hunting an Arch-Tempered Teostra today, and he carded me 4 times. He kind of cleaned my clock, so I'll have to reassess that fight and see if I can try anything differently. But yeah, aside from that, a couple of the games I've played have some overlap, I think, with Nate.
Yeah.
I guess first I'll talk about the Banner Saga 3. Yeah. So did you end up finishing that one, Nate?
Yeah, I finished it.
Okay, cool. And I guess it's a little hard to talk about without getting spoilery. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking before this. I was like, I don't know that I have much to say about it that isn't a spoiler, but that game's still cool.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's the kind of thing where we can do a spoiler cast if we get the chance.
Yeah,
I would definitely enjoy doing that. But I guess the main things to say about the Banner Saga 3. So if you are familiar with it, you kind of know you probably know more or less what it's going to be, and I felt like it was a good wrap up to that.
Yeah.
To that trilogy. It still has a lot of character dialogue, still a lot of weighty decisions. And I think they made some smart gameplay moves in terms of like the way the campaign shifts back and forth, and some of the combat updates. Nothing necessarily revolutionary, but like just some solid incremental updates to kind of continue that series. And the art and writing is all still, I felt like, really good in general. Which to me was also, I guess I will say that I was pleasantly, I was pleased to see that, because when stories get big and epic, like sometimes they kind of lose their heart or their mind. They can lose either their heart or their mind, and I felt like the Banner Saga 3 did a good job of not really going too off the rails with some of that stuff.
That is definitely an example of a story that like it's totally about like world-ending events and like larger than life stuff happening, but like the stuff you care about is still the individual characters and their strifes and their worries, and like they still present that first and foremost, and the other stuff is just like, well, this is what has pushed everybody to the brink. It's like, we're not making a game about the end of the world, we're making a game about characters at the end of the world. Right.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job with that. And for anyone who doesn't know what the Banner Saga is, I recommend starting at the first game.
Don't jump into the third one.
Yeah, do not play the third game first. It is a very story-heavy. Just pick up the trilogy or start from the first one, see if you like it.
Even having played the first 2, which I've only played all of them once when they came out, but even having played the first 2, the third one kind of just dumps you right back in and is like, all right, you remember these guys, what they were doing, what they're about? All right, go. They're like, okay, give me a minute here.
Yeah, it's like I made the combat system is I mean it has some interesting ideas. I made some stupid plays, I think, in my first battle. The turn-based combat there, but yeah, I guess that's probably good for me on the Banner Saga. Short of a spoiler cast. I did lose some important people.
Yeah, I would be curious to know if there's a way to not lose anybody for it.
Yeah. That is a challenge of that game too. Is like, unless you really, I think I only reloaded a couple times.
Okay.
So I tried to keep the story moving forward, even if I lost somebody who I cared about. But like,
yeah,
man, sometimes you really invest in some.
I had a really dark period with that game. It's like right at the end of one chapter, and then right at the beginning of the next chapter, lost like 2 people that I really did not want.
Yeah, then you're like, okay, well, am I going to win battles now? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Do I have to adjust my gameplay, and do I want to adjust my gameplay?
Yeah. It's very good.
Sounds like a game that Will would like. But yeah, and then the other thing I've been playing lately is Dead Cells. So that game I think officially launched Tuesday.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
Monday or Tuesday.
So I had picked it up in early access, maybe even sometime last year or a good while ago, when it was on a bit of a sale, because I kind of saw what it was and it sounded like it checked a lot of boxes, but I didn't really want to dive into it until it was sort of feature complete, because we talked about it a little bit before on ATACS, but I've been burned a couple times about early versions of games. And so I was kind of happy to wait, happy to see that they actually were launching it, but so far I've been enjoying it. Maybe that's hopefully not too surprising, but I am kind of glad. I wasn't 100% sure how I would land on it, but yeah, it does. So for me, like, it has, a good feel in terms of being like a Metroidvania. Like, it does a lot of its combat. It has just a good like action game feel. And it's not an RPG per se, but there are a lot of progression elements that within each run. So it's also a roguelike. And I think that's kind of its unique selling point, is that it's a roguelike Metroidvania, and it does a lot of. So I guess so you do runs and you acquire things in the runs, and for me it hits on a lot of the things that I like about good roguelikes. Like, you have a good variety of weapons. Chances are you'll see different things within each run, and the game kind of has different tactics and choices that are meaningful. And sometimes that forces you to try different things. And then you start to see, oh, hey, well, actually, this weapon is a lot better than I thought it was. Or, no, this weapon is trash and I just died. But also you kind of see interactions. So, like, I am in a run now where I've been favoring taking a lot of upgrades in what's called tactics. Which tends to be like traps and ranged weapons.
Yeah.
And I got lucky in my current run. So I got some of the regular traps, which aren't too hard to find, and I've been upgrading those. But I got lucky with some of the items I got. So I got one item that freezes enemies, and I got a bow that marks enemies and causes them to take more damage. So that's been, a lot of times I like to have a melee weapon to kind of push enemies away or deal some up close damage if I need to, but I've been kind of going with a pure range build where I drop traps, and then like if the enemies are close to me, I'll freeze them. Kind of slow down their DPS a lot, and if they're far away, I'll mark them so my traps hit them harder. So the game has a lot of meaningful mechanics in its random. I guess it's randomization. So that's been, and of course sometimes you have those runs where you kind of limp along until something finally comes and puts the axe into you. But it has a lot of the cool stuff in terms of learning and finding different things, and it also, the way it kind of like its permanent upgrade system does some interesting things with, like, you might find something that that's a permanent upgrade that kind of helps you take new paths, I guess.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Metroidvania classic, like, I'm going to open new areas things. Those are permanent.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've seen that done before, at least not in such a way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a kind of a bit of a pleasant surprise for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how much longer it goes. I'd like to finish. I guess I don't know what the end game is 100% since I haven't quite unquote.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But I would like to see if I can kind of clear a run and.
Have you fought a boss yet?
Yeah, I fought a number of bosses, including some pretty big, scary looking bosses that looked like they could be a final boss or next to final boss.
Gotcha. So you've probably made it in further than me. I've only cleared one boss that was like, this is a named boss with a health bar that stretches across the screen kind of thing.
Yeah. Was that the concierge?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I guess the only other things to say is I also really like some of the music.
Yeah.
And I think the game, surprisingly, it has this very weird styling up front that I wasn't sure I would like, because it's very dark and grim and kind of gory. But then, it has some of the kind of roguelike storytelling or I guess Metroidvania in general, where you're kind of picking up hints and learning things, and your character also seems to be a bit of a goober.
He really is, and I guess I get what they're going for with his weird shrugs and thumbs ups, but I don't know that I like it.
That actually has kind of charmed me.
Okay.
You find a body and he's leans in and looks at it, and it's he says something really grim, oh man, this person this person died a horrible death, and then he looks closer and he pokes it, and an item pops out, and he's oh, look what I found.
Yep.
Or he gives random thumbs up to these horrible monster looking things.
Right.
It just it kind of cracks me up. So yeah, I guess that's a bit of a taste thing, but
yeah. I don't know that I particularly love that, but it doesn't bother me either. It just seems silly.
Yeah. So, anywho, I am curious, Nate. Have you found any strategies that you've leaned on?
Yeah, I don't know that I really have strategies between runs because it's so run based. There's basically no permanent progression other than those exploration abilities. So it really does seem to be a case of building a strategy as you go in a run. I don't know. At first I thought I really liked having lots of grenades and a good bow and just fighting at range, but then sometimes you just don't find those things. So, you got to go with what you find. The best run I've had was like all fire-based skills.
Oh, really?
There's one secondary weapon that was just like throwing a little flask, and it's really quick.
Okay.
And it would just spread fire on the ground and do fire damage over time to things. And then I had a sword that it was the big broadswords that are really slow but do a lot of damage.
Yeah,
And
I like that weapon.
It did like plus 150% damage if the enemy's on fire or something.
Okay.
So I had fire grenade and the fire flask thing and one of the traps that also would burn guys. and then just like jump in with this broadsword and hit them all once and everything explodes because they're all on fire.
Yeah. It's kind of neat whenever, I guess, you see stuff like that lining up.
Yeah, those kinds of builds that come together through a run are really fun. But I've only had that happen a couple times so far.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll be curious too as you play the game more, because I do find like the game gives you a choice at the beginning of a bow and a shield.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've only tried the shield a couple times, and it just felt really bad for me.
Yeah, it's just too slow for the way I feel like the game is trying to get me to play. Like the game is so fast and so actiony and so like brutal that like walking slowly with a shield seems counterproductive.
Yeah, that's kind of like, and trying to time parries just seems like a recipe for getting hit.
Yeah.
But there was one time I had like a couple of good traps and I got a shield and I was like, well, maybe, but then I found a ranged weapon and traded it out. But I could see if if you unlock some cool survival stuff.
Yeah.
How you could do kind of like I'm just going to keep throwing down traps and like turtle up and let my traps do the work or something. It's hard to say if that's viable or not, but the game does have kind of these. That's one of the things I like about it is it feels like it tries to, sometimes force you, but also sometimes give you like these different, builds that can work out.
Yeah, for sure. And I do like the style of their maps. Like I think we do have a tendency to call it a Metroidvania, and then there are definitely comparisons there, especially with like the exploration abilities you get. But like pretty much the maps are just you're always moving right, and there's not too many like side paths that go very far.
Right.
So it's a very forward momentum based game. Like you're always moving forward. You're always like encountering new enemies and finding new upgrades, and it just happens at a very quick pace.
Yeah.
But I guess the exploration part of it is you can kind of decide, or at least this is what I'm finding, is that you can kind of decide like, okay, is this going to be a slow run or is this going to be a fast run?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you go slow, you're going to find all the upgrades in a map before you leave that map and you'll be stronger. But if you go really fast, you can get through those timed doors that lock after a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then you get like crazy stuff if you do that, but then you're like being higher risk, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I didn't mention it, but you're absolutely right. Like I really like the way they've kind of plugged that mechanic in. So it incentivizes you to, like you said, kind of start off, see if you can go fast, and if it clicks. Plus, if the faster you go, I guess the faster you're turning in your permanent upgrades. Although the fewer of them you're probably collecting, so it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, so like all that stuff combined with just the general simplicity of the maps, like they're easy to understand from a bird's eye view, and then like there are different like interconnected maps, so you could go different paths to the bosses, and you could make decisions about what types of enemies you're most comfortable against or things like that. So while I don't really think it's a Metroidvania, it has some things that I think I like about those games, which is like, okay, I can think a little bit about how I want to explore an area. Do I want to go through different regions with enemies that I'm more comfortable with? Do I want to go slow? Do I want to go fast? What am I looking for here? Like those things are happening, but it's happening at such a quick pace that I never get bogged down in the exploration of it, which is something that I'll struggle with in a more like free-flowing Metroidvania sometimes.
Yeah, like a Hollow Knight.
Yeah, like a Hollow Knight or something like that. Yeah, it's cool. I like kicking in doors that hit people. That feels real good.
Stunning enemies, yeah. I've gotten to where if I have a good weapon for it, I just smash all the doors.
Yeah, I just always roll through doors.
Point.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Well, cool. Well, I guess that may well wrap it up for this episode. So Nate, what's on your radar? What are you planning on playing next?
Well, the main thing is definitely more Dead Cells. I've probably got a couple other things on my Steam backlog that I may or may not get to. I want to check out the Prey Moon Crash expansion that came out over the summer, but I don't know when I'll actually get around to it. So for now, it's just Dead Cells. That's the only thing I'm sure about.
Cool. Will?
Probably God of War. I've got about an hour in that. Then probably going to play some more Monster Hunter World, this game that I think you've heard about. Yeah. And otherwise, I'm going to start a game tomorrow called Gunheart, and I have no idea what that'll be like. We're going to see.
It probably has guns in it.
Yes, I bet it does.
Well, maybe maybe we'll hear about that on the next ATACS.
You might if you're lucky.
That's a bit of a cliffhanger. Well, for myself, I guess I'm in a similar position as Nate. I'll see how far I go with Dead Cells and how deep that game goes. And then I guess I'm also in a similar position as well, as I'll probably be hunting monsters in the meantime. Other than that, yeah, it's tough to say. I'll probably, if I pick something else up, I'll probably pick up a 2018 game. But off the top of my head, I don't know what that is or if I'll get to that point. So
cool.
So yeah, Dead Cells and Monster Hunter. All right. Well, thanks for listening. This has been episode 43, and we'll catch you in a couple weeks.